The camera remains fixed on a solitary figure, hunched over a piano in a dimly lit recording studio. It's 2004, and Dan Fogelberg's fingers dance across the keys with practiced precision. His voice, still remarkably pure at 53, fills the room as he records what he suspects might be his final album. "I received my diagnosis yesterday," Fogelberg reveals in a rare 2004 interview, his voice steady despite the words. "Advanced prostate cancer. The doctors say I should have been screened earlier." Flash back to New Year's Eve, 1975. A crowded grocery store in Peoria, Illinois. A chance encounter with an old flame that would later become Same Old Lang Syne, perhaps his most enduring hit, the song that captured a fleeting moment and turned it into something eternal. Dan had this uncanny ability to transform the most personal experiences into universal emotions, says Eagle's Don Henley. He wasn't just writing songs, he was crafting perfect little time capsules of human connection. Few artists have experienced such a dramatic rise and such a purposeful step away from the spotlight. How does someone who reaches the pinnacle of commercial success, multiple platinum albums, sold-out arenas, songs that defined an era, deliberately choose a different path? And at what cost? This is the story of a reluctant star, a masterful songwriter who navigated the treacherous waters of fame only to find himself fighting for something far more precious in the end: time itself. Beyond the hits and headlines lies the true legacy of Dan Fogelberg. Early background. Born Daniel Grayling. Fogelberg, on August 13, 1951, in Peoria, Illinois, Dan was destined for a life in music. His father, Lawrence Fogelberg, was a high school band director whose disciplined approach to music would later inspire Dan's touching tribute, Leader of the Band. His mother, Margaret, a classically trained pianist, filled their home with melodies that seeped into young Dan's consciousness. "I was surrounded by music from the time I was born," Fogelberg recalled in a 1997 interview. "My father would bring home records of everything from Beethoven to Brubeck. There was no escape from it, and honestly, I never wanted to escape." By age 13, Fogelberg was playing in bands, absorbing influences ranging from the Beatles to James Taylor. His first group, The Clan, performed at local venues around Peoria, giving the shy teenager his first taste of connecting with an audience through music. At the University of Illinois, where he enrolled to study theater arts in 1969, Fogelberg's musical ambitions crystallized. College friend and future collaborator Tim Weisberg remembered, "Even then, Dan wasn't just writing songs, he was creating landscapes with lyrics and melodies. You could close your eyes and see exactly what he was singing about." After dropping out of college to pursue music full-time, Fogelberg relocated to California in 1971. Within months, he caught the attention of legendary manager Irving Azoff, who was impressed by both Fogelberg's songwriting depth and his multi-instrumental talents. "I signed him because he was that rare artist who could do it all," Azoff later stated. "He could write, sing, play virtually any instrument you put in front of him. But more importantly, he had something to say." Columbia Records agreed, offering the 20-year-old a recording contract in late 1971. Fogelberg's debut album, Home Free, was released in 1972 to modest sales but encouraging critical reviews. The foundation was laid, but the road ahead would prove far more complex than the earnest young musician could have imagined. Rising tension. The commercial disappointment of Home Free created immediate pressure on Fogelberg. Columbia executives who had invested in him as a potential star began questioning their decision. Epic Records eventually acquired his contract, pairing the young songwriter with Eagles guitarist Joe Walsh to produce his second album. Dan was caught between worlds from the beginning, Walsh recalled in a 2010 interview. The label wanted commercial hits, but he was writing these intricate, deeply personal songs. "I just tried to find the middle ground where his artistry could shine through in a way that might connect with radio." Their collaboration, Souvenirs, 1974, yielded moderate success with tracks like Part of the Plan, reaching number 31 on the Billboard charts. This taste of commercial validation came with new expectations. expectations that would haunt Fogelberg for years to come. Suddenly, there were all these people telling me what my next album should sound like, Fogelberg told Rolling Stone in 1979. I didn't get into music to have strangers dictate my creative process. I almost walked away right then. Instead, he retreated to Colorado, finding solace in the mountains where he wrote his third album, Captured Angel, 1975. Recording most of the instruments himself, Fogelberg established a pattern of creative isolation that both preserved his artistic vision and created tension with his label. The personal toll became evident in his relationships. His marriage to Maggie Slaymaker in 1974 began unraveling almost immediately, with the divorce finalized by 1976. Friends noticed Fogelberg's increasing wariness of the industry machine. He started seeing everything as a potential threat to his authenticity, said longtime friend and musician Chris Hillman. Record executives, producers, even some collaborators, Dan had this fear that they all wanted to water down what he was trying to express. The critical breakthrough came with Netherlands, 1977, a lushly orchestrated album that showcased Fogelberg's maturing songcraft. Critics praised its ambitious scope, but sales remained modest. The tension between artistic growth and commercial expectations reached a breaking point. During the recording of Phoenix in 1979, Fogelberg battled his label over nearly every aspect of production. Session musician Russ Kunkel remembered, "There were literally shouting matches in the studio. Dan would say, 'I didn't pour my soul into this song to have it smothered in strings,' or whatever the suggestion was." Ironically, it was from this conflict-ridden album that Fogelberg's career would take an unexpected upward turn. Longer, a simple love song written for his then-girlfriend, later second wife, Anastasia Bozeman, would become his breakthrough hit, reaching number 2 on the Billboard charts. The song I spent 20 minutes writing in a borrowed cabin became the one everyone wanted to hear, Fogelberg later reflected with a mixture of amusement and frustration. Meanwhile, compositions I'd labored over for months went largely unnoticed. There's no predicting what will resonate with people. Peak success. By 1981, Dan Fogelberg had achieved what most musicians only dream of: critical respect, commercial success, and artistic freedom. The Innocent Age, a double-album meditation on the cycles of life, represented the pinnacle of his commercial appeal. The album spawned 4 top 20 hits, including Same Old Lang Syne, Hard to Say, Leader of the Band, and Run for the Roses. It was surreal, Fogelberg told Musician magazine in 1982. I'd go to the grocery store and hear my voice coming through the speakers. People would stop me on the street. I never wanted fame, just the chance to make music on my terms. Behind the success lurked mounting personal challenges. The constant touring was taking a physical toll, and Fogelberg, an intensely private person, struggled with the public's increasing intrusion into his life. His road manager, Michael O'Hara, witnessed the strain. Dan would perform for 2 hours, giving everything on stage, then retreat to his hotel room alone. While the band celebrated, he'd be working on new material, or just sitting in silence, trying to decompress. The isolation was self-imposed but necessary for his sanity. The autobiographical nature of Same Old Lang Syne, with its poignant depiction of a chance encounter with an old girlfriend, invited even more scrutiny into Fogelberg's personal history. The woman in question was eventually identified as Jill Grulich, his high school girlfriend, creating a media fascination that irritated the private songwriter. People became more interested in the gossip than the craft, noted producer Norbert Putnam. Dan found that deeply frustrating. He'd created this beautiful, melancholy reflection on life's passages, and people wanted tabloid details. His marriage to Anastasia was also showing signs of strain. Though they shared a love of nature and privacy in their mountain home in Colorado, the pressures of Fogelberg's career created inevitable tensions. Success changes the equation, Fogelberg admitted in a rare moment of candor to Performing Songwriter magazine. You think it solves problems, but it usually just creates new ones. I found myself wondering if people around me valued the music or the machine that my career had become. By 1984, as he completed touring obligations for Windows and Walls, Fogelberg had reached a crossroads. despite having established himself as one of the premier singer-songwriters of his generation, he felt increasingly disconnected from both the music industry and the artistic expression that had once defined him. Major turning point. In 1985, Dan Fogelberg shocked both his record label and fans with High Country Snows, a full-fledged bluegrass album featuring collaborations with Doc Watson, Jerry Douglas, and other acoustic music luminaries. This dramatic departure from his pop success represented not just a musical shift, but a reclamation of his artistic soul. "I remember when Dan first played us the rough cuts," said Epic Records executive Roy Lott. "There was this uncomfortable silence in the room. Someone finally said, 'Where are the hits?' Dan just smiled and replied, 'This is the music I need to make right now.'" The album peaked at only number 30 on the Billboard charts, a steep decline from his previous commercial heights, but earned respect from traditionalists in the bluegrass community, a validation Fogelberg valued more than sales figures. "It was the most liberating moment of my career," Fogelberg later reflected. "I finally stopped trying to please everyone and just followed my musical instincts. The commercial fallout was predictable, but the creative rewards were immeasurable." This artistic declaration of independence coincided with major personal changes. Fogelberg and his second wife, Anastasia, divorced in 1985. The following year, he purchased a 610-acre ranch in Colorado's San Juan Mountains, seeking solitude and reconnection with the natural world that had always inspired him. Moving to that mountain ranch was Dan's way of resetting everything, explained longtime friend Jean Fogelberg, who would become his third wife in 2002. He built a recording studio there, started practicing sustainable living decades before it was fashionable, and really recommitted to what mattered most to him. His subsequent albums, Exiles, 1987, The Wild Places, 1990, and River of Souls, 1993, continued his artistic exploration while his commercial profile diminished. Far from lamenting this decline, Fogelberg embraced his new freedom from expectations. This period also marked Fogelberg's increasing environmental activism. He performed at numerous benefit concerts for conservation causes and donated land for wildlife preservation. His music became more overtly concerned with environmental themes, particularly on The Wild Places, which he dedicated to preserving America's natural landscapes. The music industry basically wrote him off as a commercial force after the Bluegrass album, noted music journalist Dave Marsh. The irony is that by walking away from the machinery of fame, Fogelberg found his authentic voice again. He made some of his most honest, if not most famous, music during those years. Dramatic confrontation. In May 2004, following a routine physical examination, Dan Fogelberg received the news that would change everything. Advanced prostate cancer, already spread beyond possibility of surgical intervention. At just 53 years old, the man whose poetic lyrics had always found beauty in life's impermanence now faced his own mortality. "It was a profoundly surreal moment," John Fogelberg recalled in a 2008 interview. "We were sitting in this sterile doctor's office, and Dan was so calm, asking detailed questions while I was falling apart inside. Later that night, he picked up his guitar and started writing. That was Dan, processing life through music until the very end." Fogelberg decided to make his diagnosis public in an intimate letter to fans posted on his website in August 2004. "I have recently been diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer," he wrote. "I've been living with this disease for 3 years and didn't realize it. Do yourself and your loved ones a favor and get tested now." The honesty of his announcement reflected the integrity that had guided his career. Unlike many celebrities who shroud their illnesses in secrecy, Fogelberg used his diagnosis as a platform to advocate for early detection. His final album, Full Circle, 2003, released just before his diagnosis became public, took on haunting new meaning. Longtime producer Norbert Putnam observed, "Listening to those songs after learning about his cancer was chilling. It's like on some subconscious level, Dan knew what was coming. The treatments were grueling. Hormone therapy, experimental protocols, and constant medical appointments became Fogelberg's new reality. Despite this, he maintained both his privacy and dignity, retreating to his beloved mountain home in Colorado, where nature had always provided solace. "He never wanted pity," said friend James Taylor. "When I called him after hearing the news, he spent most of the conversation asking about my kids and my music." That was Dan, deflecting attention from himself even when facing the unimaginable. As his condition worsened through 2005 and 2006, Fogelberg made peace with his legacy. He meticulously organized his musical archives and spent precious time with close friends and family. His last public statement in August 2007 was characteristically understated. "While I am currently being treated for advanced prostate cancer, I am feeling well and am active and productive." 4 months later, on December 16, 2007, Dan Fogelberg died at his home in Maine. The man who had once sung, "There's a magic every moment, there's a miracle each day," had lived that philosophy until the end, facing death with the same quiet grace that had defined his life. Legacy. Dan Fogelberg left behind more than just songs. He created a musical legacy that continues to resonate powerfully today. His unique blend of folk, rock, classical, and country influences produced a sophisticated catalog that transcends easy categorization. Fogelberg made it okay for men to express vulnerability in mainstream music, reflected Jackson Browne. He wrote unabashedly about love, loss, and family, with a poetic sensitivity that opened doors for all of us. His holiday composition, "Same Old Lang Syne," has achieved permanent status in the American Christmas Songbook, while "Leader of the Band" remains a universal expression of gratitude from children to parents. The Dan Fogelberg Foundation, established after his death, continues raising awareness about prostate cancer screening. Dan believed artists had a responsibility to use their platform for something beyond entertainment, John Fogelberg explained. His openness about his illness might be his most important legacy. As new listeners discover his work through streaming platforms and film soundtracks, Fogelberg's musical vision, sophisticated, heartfelt, and timeless, fulfills the promise he articulated. "I hope my songs have the kind of longevity where someone might find something meaningful in them years from now." If you enjoyed this documentary, please subscribe for more untold stories of music's most influential artists.